Okay. All right, everyone. We've got about, I think about 30 minutes or so. We're going to talk about a lot of topics in that time. If you see me looking at my phone, it's not because I've got something more interesting to do. It's because I want to make sure we leave time for probably a lot of questions. I know Pankaj and I were talking before this that AI is such a hot topic that we could imagine having quite a few questions. So we want to be sure we're able to answer those for you. So very quickly, my name is Mike Kaput. I work at Marketing AI Institute, and we make AI approachable and actionable for marketers and business leaders. So we've been doing that for 7 years now. We actually spun out of a marketing agency where I served on the leadership team for about a decade. And the company spun out of our need as marketers to actually understand how to actually be using AI in our business and in our marketing. We're not machine learning engineers or data scientists. We're marketers and business leaders trying to actually use this technology to create results at the time for our clients and now to grow our own business. So I'm lucky enough to be joined by Pankaj here. I'll let him introduce himself a little more, but then we're going to have kind of a back and forth conversation about what's going on in AI today, why it matters for marketers generally, and also, most importantly, what does this actually mean to all of you in this room as you are either growing your own marketing career if you're in a job already or trying to enter the field of marketing or business generally. And so we definitely want to really make it tailored to what is going to be relevant to you as you are going out into the workforce with this transformative technology change that we're living through right now. So Pankaj, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. This is working, right? I remember, I think, before I introduce myself, a couple of years ago, there was like a cartoon which said, it just struck me as we were discussing, where you had this Shark Tank environment and people were coming and pitching and they were obviously being very mean. And then somebody came and said, hey, I am pitching orange juice. And they said, okay, fine. What's the big deal? It's made out of AI. And they all started jumping, I want it and I want it. So that's where we were with AI. And I think I've heard a lot about AI in the last 2 hours. As I was introduced, my name is Pankaj Chopra. I actually started my career in marketing, spent the first 15 years of my career in different marketing roles at Procter. That's where I think I really learned marketing. Somewhere there was a change of heart. I went into analytics. And then progressively, as the world changed, got into deeper into analytics. And for the last few years, and I moved to Johnson & Johnson after that. But for the last few years, I actually went to an enterprise role where we were building this capability on data science and analytics, a fair amount of steep learning curve, did a lot of Python work. But more than that, I think this theme has come through. How do you really transform organizations and large organizations like a J&J, and now I work for Mondelez, I lead their analytics function, where technology has become a little more democratized, but the challenge is how do you really drive change management? And I know this change management discussion came earlier today. So this is where I am, and we'll have a chat. I think we'll have a more open dialogue because I think a lot has been discussed. And then I think we'll have much more open questions where feel free to ask us whatever there is in your mind in terms of AI, what is AI, what do I need to do, how to do it, what's my role, what's the future. We can talk everything here.
So before we dive into that, I wanted to maybe take a couple quick minutes and kind of get your perspective on AI is not inherently a new thing, right? I mean, we're living through a pretty unique moment in terms of an explosion of generative AI, but maybe could you put into context for us, how do you view when someone says, well, what is AI? What's the big deal? Why now? What would you respond to that?
Anybody would know when was this word coined and when did AI really start? Without looking at Google.
Someone over here, I think.
Yeah. 1950s. So it was done by Alan Turing. The first chatbot was done at MIT by the name of Eliza. So AI, and when you talk about large language models, especially when you talk about neural networks and deep learning, has been around. We've been working with neural networks and deep learning for a pretty long time, and I've personally been involved with that as well. It just happened that last year, 30th of November, suddenly OpenAI came in, and this whole new monster, ChatGPT, came in, and suddenly everybody felt this is like a new tool, and suddenly AI becomes very popular. And I remember, I think a few weeks later, my chief supplier, and I was still working for Johnson and Johnson that time, he said, Pankaj, I really want you to do something with ChatGPT. I said, okay, that's fine, but what do you want to do? So suddenly we found when we came back from the holidays in January, everybody was talking about AI and ChatGPT and large language models and prompting. So what's happened is that with OpenAI kind of being more accessible to all of us, the role and the visibility of AI has been really, I would say, you know, accelerated. The impact also has been accelerated because now with OpenAI, with the large language models, we could do much more, much faster, and I think we spoke about it in the previous panel, versus what we could do before it was so well democratized. So not a new thing. I think we've been working with large language models for several years, but this whole democratization and PRization of AI happened with ChatGPT coming in.
Absolutely. It's not a perfect analogy, but I kind of view it as ChatGPT as the iPhone moment for AI. We're not necessarily coming out of nowhere with technology that hasn't existed in some form, but the light bulb is going off for every single marketer and business leader of, oh my God, I get it. I can start using this to do many, many different things. And I think that's where you see not only some of the incredible advancements in the last year. I mean, there's been some breathtaking innovation, but it's more the accessibility has really gotten, I'm sure you're seeing it, every business leader saying, what are we doing with AI?
Yeah.
What should we be doing with AI?
Yeah.
Can it do this? Can it do that? So to that point, where do you see the biggest advantages for marketers using artificial intelligence today in a variety of roles?
So I'll give you an example, a real example which we are living. So we wanted to run a campaign, and generally you start with this whole insight generation process. You do some focus groups, versus that. Then you start looking at refining your target. You come up with a proposition. You start targeting. You first test your proposition, which we conventionally used to say we need to test a concept. Then you get into execution, where you look at the creative, and then you put it in market, and then you test it, and then you see how it's performing. Generally, this cycle used to take 3 to 4 to 5 months, depending on, where, when, how. So last week, we've actually developed a ring-fenced large language model, and on day one, you could actually go there, put in your target. We actually added some principles of neuroscience. We did a little bit of engineering on large language models, added a few principles of neuroscience there because end of the day marketing has a big element of neuroscience there. We also gave it some category context and trained the model with a little bit of a category in, I would say, context as well. And we actually, what we typed, and this is a real thing, we said, hey, Sarah is a 35-year-old woman, high achiever, and she comes home living in New York City. She loves wine, but she's also very health-driven. And we actually gave an archetype of a consumer. And obviously, within a click, it gave us various insights which will be relevant to Sarah. We actually had to regenerate it a couple of times because there was a couple of things which were not so category specific, and that's where the customization happens. But by late afternoon, we actually had 7 or 8 propositions as to if we have to talk to Sarah, what do we talk? And then in this whole world of precision where you want to start customizing your messages, you probably want more than one message because there's a Sarah, there's a Julie, there are 5 other people. So by end of the day, we actually said, hey, this is the benefit, this is like the proposition we would like to talk about. And we actually put it on like a very quick overnight testing. So on Tuesday morning, we actually had 3 routes. Now, when you go back to large language models, the models you can actually feed the routes in, and they start coming up with actually creative options, storyboards, and even with a brand playbook. You can say, hey, for an Oreo NFL creative, this is the storyboard, this is the brand playbook, this is where you push the boundary, this is where it is within the brand guidelines, this is where you need an exception. And on day 3, we actually had a very clear creative which we could give to an agency and say, hey, can you really operationalize it? Went into testing again with the creative by, I think, Wednesday afternoon, and we were ready. Now, this is obviously all hands on deck. We were very focused because we had a very tight timeline. But something which would have taken us 3 months, we were able to churn it out in 3 days. So that was one huge impact. The second thing which happened was that there's a lot of work which we could do internally versus relying on external suppliers. Now, we still work with a lot of suppliers. We do a lot of data engineering with them. We have a lot of people who build for us, build products for us. But the context of whom we work with externally has changed. In the past, it was an advertising agency who would go to a creative illustrator who would actually go to somebody else. Now it's more about having the same people in the room as well, but also having a discussion with our data engineering team that, hey, the model is not regenerating. And I think we spoke about hallucination earlier. It's hallucinating a little bit. Can we train it a little bit as well? So from 3 months to 3 days, great results. And then now we have a machine. So now if I have to really go with precision and if I have to target 5,000 SARAs with a slight different messaging, I do have the ability to do that, which I never had.
I want to emphasize a few things that you said, maybe give the audience some context. Going from something in marketing that everyone has to do that takes 3 months and going down to 3 days, I can't overstate the impact that that has on everything related to marketing operations and careers. AI is very, very quickly helping us do things we already do 10 times faster or more. Not every aspect of marketing, but plenty of them. That changes the entire calculation of business models, what skills you hire for, how much you're willing to pay for certain types of marketing, expectations, everything. That alone, if that was the only thing, if all AI advancements stopped today and never started again, if we can do that, that's already incredible. And second, I just want to emphasize that if you think about all the individual things that someone does in marketing every day, now there's a million things, but think about brainstorming campaign ideas, headlines, ad copy or angles, writing blog posts, writing creative, generating creative, creating campaign strategies, creating campaign plans, creating project plans, on and on and on and on. We're starting to see AI technology and tools that can dramatically accelerate all of those things or even do them outright as well or better than we can on our own. So this really is, if you start to look at, forget kind of, is AI going to replace this role or that role? That's a relevant conversation. But if you look at the task level of what people are spending their time on in marketing day in, day out, it's breathtaking how much of this stuff is starting to be augmented by some of the technology we have off the shelf today. So I was curious, Pankaj, from your perspective, as marketers are thinking through how do I start using these tools, what are you hearing marketing leaders or business leaders asking about, looking for in terms of these tools? What kind of capabilities are they trying to achieve? What kind of capabilities should they be trying to achieve?
I think one paradigm that is changing or has changed is this has become the new norm. You need a marketeer who can actually deliver something in 3 days versus 3 months. Now, our experience is, new marketeers like yourselves are in a much better place because you tend to be more digitally native. You're sitting in this conference room, the very fact you're here and we're discussing it is a big deal because, trust me, a lot of people in very large and very smart companies don't do that, right? They still would love and stay with a very traditional way of managing it. So this becomes an expectation. So when you start looking at a marketing job profile, or when you start looking at marketing talent, when you start hiring talent, promoting talent, giving people leadership on critical projects, I think the question is this person a contemporary marketeer, or is this person a traditional marketeer? And interestingly, this is not the first time it's happening. This whole contemporarization has happened before. I think some 8 or 9 years ago, when you guys were all in kindergarten, the big thing was digital marketing, and that was a big thing. Digital marketing, and everybody was about digital marketing, and are you a marketeer or are you a digital marketeer? And you said, no, 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 I'm a digital marketeer. There is no digital marketeer today. Everybody is a digital marketeer, and that is marketing. In our company, most of our brands, many of our brands, excepting for a few large brands, have 100% of their media spend online, right? So this is marketing. So what will happen is that there are a couple of I would say ramifications here. The first is, if you are a more savvy, AI-driven, analytics-driven, technology-enabled marketeer, you can speak the lingo, you understand the landscape. You don't need to code in Python. There's so many people who can do that, right? But if you understand this landscape and if you can understand the power of this tool, you're already at an advantage. And I think that's where I think opportunities going forward will go to people who can actually do that, who can talk to agencies and business partners and talk the same lingo with them, and then deliver based on this new paradigm. And I'm sure after 10 years there'll be another thing. It's not the last time things are disrupting, but what happens is, and it's very interesting, when a disruption comes in an environment, they are early adopters, and they are people who either stay in denial or who say, hey, I'm pretty good in what I'm doing, or they just don't have the courage to take that leap. So my only guidance is keep this as a default option, keep learning in this area, and this is how not only marketing, we talk about supply chain, we talk about finance, every function, even procurement, is continuing to change, driven by artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks, deep learning, large language models. So that's where the whole world is heading.
And I think to kind of drill down into one of the points you made, I don't think anyone in this room is what I would consider behind. I mean, there's so much hype about AI. Everyone is talking about it. People are doing incredible things with it. ChatGPT has been out a year. It is time, if you haven't explored it deeply yet, to start doing so, I would say. I don't know how much more time you can sit on the sidelines, but as of today, nobody is behind. It sounds a lot like everyone has stuff figured out, especially the entire legion of people that have sprung up online that suddenly know exactly how to prompt ChatGPT and give you 10 great tips to do so. The reality is, business leaders, even very, very savvy ones at some of the top brands in the world, are still trying to figure all this stuff out. So it's a massive opportunity. So as we're talking here about certain tools or capabilities or skills, if you don't have those or haven't heard of those, I wouldn't freak out and get scared of it. Everyone's a little nervous about this technology disruption, but you're not behind. You just do have to get started, I would say. And to that point, I kind of wanted to ask you, before we dive into some audience questions here, how would you recommend people in this room get started kind of systematically evolving their skills in the age of AI?
Yeah. I think the first thing is just to keep it front and center. I think I'm a golfer, so if you're a golfer, you basically you focus on the follow through. You never hit the ball, right? When you're playing golf, you never hit the ball. You do your swing, you go back, you do your backswing, drive through, and then you follow through. So your focus is always on your swing and following through, and somewhere in between that, your club hits the ball, and the ball goes. People in golf struggle when they're trying to hit the ball because you can never hit the ball. It never works like that. If you hit it, it doesn't go very far, which doesn't help. So similarly, I think the first thing is if you can keep this whole area of, hey, marketing is more contemporary, more enabled by AI, and that's my default option. That's the starting point. Once you start with that, and you're all smart people in school, undergrad or grad school, when you start considering options, whether it's a project or whether it's a new role or whether you're trying to manage a team, you'll first say, hey, what is the new thing out there? What is happening in the landscape? What is that early muscle which I need to develop? Because that's something which you want to start understanding. Gen AI is, everybody knows Gen AI, right? Obviously, when you go in, you will have access to Gen AI, or you'll have somebody who will have access to Gen AI. So the first thing is always keeping in mind that knowing that this world will evolve, how do I really keep an eye on the external environment and see how it is evolving? The second one is it's very critical to have an appreciation of the landscape, how it's changing, how the landscape is changing in terms of what are the new capabilities which are coming in this area which can really impact you. So I think early this year in January is when suddenly this is whole. So I'll give you another example. So if you actually start looking at consumer insights, a lot of insights can come through unstructured data, which is not only social listening, but it's ratings and reviews, it's communities, it's search. And we know what people talk on social media is not what people search for. And once you start getting everything together, you start getting a very good understanding of consumers. So this area, for example, has been disrupted for a while, where you start saying, hey, if I want insights, I need to default to something which is very tech-enabled. And what is out there which is tech-enabled? And it's so easy to find. Even if you go into LinkedIn, even if you go to your business partners, if you go to somebody like Mike and say, hey, what's the new thing out there where I can actually get insights which are non-traditional, which use a non-traditional way? Especially when we're talking about real-time data and we're talking about precision marketing. Once you do that, the next thing you need to know is to ask the right questions. Because end of the day, all this AI, or everything we talk about, all this fancy tech, has to solve a very simple business question. Is it that my consumer, I need to drive penetration? Is it I need to drive consumption? Am I losing share? Is my copy not relevant? The marketing questions haven't changed. When I did marketing, I used to do Philip Kotler many years ago. And if I open that book, which was pre-digital, the principles have not changed. You still have the who, what, how. I think what has changed is that how do we kind of solve for them? So my only guidance here is that when you start getting into solutioning mode, look around, stay in touch externally to see what is out there. And now with LinkedIn, I think we get more than we need number of people coming and saying, hey, I can basically sell you something. Have a chat, have a small POC, show a small win, and that can start driving your whole process. So I think that'll be it. If you can learn Python, great. If you can understand a little bit about data architecture, great. If you want to have a little bit of appreciation of data engineering, will be helpful. But that's not the first thing you need to do as soon as you move out of grad school. But eventually, if you have a little understanding of this whole data technology landscape, even at a very high level, it's very useful when you start having conversations with external vendors, even with internal IT. When you have a chat with IT, sometimes it feels you're talking a very different language and everything is so hard. So that's where I think if you have a little bit of an understanding of tech and data beyond the obvious, that becomes a big enabler.
Excellent. I think we've got like 5 minutes left. Maybe jump into some audience questions.
Any questions? Okay, we have one over there. I'll come to you next. Hi, I just want to thank you for your time and for your sharing your expertise with us. But I have a couple questions. I guess my first one, I just wanted to know, like, more specifically, how has AI been used, like, and integrated into customer data platforms for like more personalized marketing campaigns? And like, is there a way to go about using AI in these methods, or like, is it more broad and not as like if you use AI for a campaign, like obviously you need like a personal element to it, but can AI do that as well and like have people used it for their campaigns? And then if I as a student was looking into finding more resources to learn about AI, where would I look?
I think personalized marketing is very AI driven, and that was my earlier point that it's been around for a while. So if you look at personalized, basically you start with a micro target, and then you start connecting your cohorts with shopper data. And then once you do that, you start coming up with probabilistic customer profiles. You start targeting them, and then you start measuring how I would say effective your campaign is, right? So if you look at the whole, and the way we start correlating customers with the shopper basket and we projecting it, that is a pretty, I would say, that is fairly, there's a fair amount of machine learning which goes into it. What happens is that once you say, hey, my cohort, so you do that, you target your consumer, and you have a pretty poor, I would say, response. We basically close the loop and say, hey, for some reason, some assumption which the model had didn't work, and we make some changes in the model. And once we do that, and we do it iteratively, and it happens very quickly, and once we see that the sales uplift improves based on personalized, the machine learns that, hey, if I am focusing, targeting my consumer at this day part, and if this is the weather, and if this is the context, and if this is the news on CNN, because now we're talking about big data, right? There's a very heavy correlation. There's a multiple correlation. There's a multiple regression which is happening right now, which is basically neural networks, right? The machine starts saying, hey, if I'm going to send something to this consumer at this time of the day and a bad weather, it's not going to work. So the next time when you're sending a message, the machine will basically decide not to do that at that moment. So I can spend an hour talking about it, but the point here is that it's a little bit of a trial and error which the machine does, the algorithm does. It's happened so fast that you will never realize. But the machine, in the past, we would have had to train the machine again and again. Now you don't have to, and that's where AI comes in. On your second question, I think it's you can even start with Google and just type AI for marketeers. They'll start throwing ads at you. If they're doing a good job, they'll basically start targeting you. It's as simple as that. You have Coursera. But the best way to learn anything is by doing it. So if you guys are working or once you start working, pick up a small project and go to your manager and say, hey, I want to really do this. Very little investment. This is the business question. I want to do this because this is a new thing to do. And test it out. The best way to learn is by doing it. Uh, Reading can only get you so far.
Hi, I'm Anju. Great presentation. I actually have a question on the readiness of organizations when it comes to AI. I think that you had talked about how like AI makes like a project that may have cost you would need 3 months now taking 3 days, and then how do you see the rest of the organization kind of coming to terms with the fact that now we have this part maybe going a little bit faster? How do we get everybody else to kind of catch up so that everybody's aligned, especially in a world where everything's kind of happening in a faster rate than before?
I actually think this is a huge challenge, and let me know if you agree, because many of the brands that we work with, we intentionally have structured workshops and consulting to help with this very challenge, because there's two big challenges that we see. Despite how much brands are talking about AI, they're using it. Many of the people in this room are using it quite a bit. many brands either don't know where to start, or once they know where to start, how do they keep going? And I think the second one is more what you're talking about, because the issue is many brands are not prepared, in my opinion, fully for AI. It's going to take time, but you would be shocked at the number of boards, executives, leaders we've talked to, very smart, but who are way behind in terms of rolling out formal education and programs internally to do exactly what you said. So you may be very lucky in getting a great team that runs an amazing pilot project, and it does these kinds of cost and time savings, but getting the entire organization rowing in the same direction on AI is honestly, I think, at a macro level, going to take years for enterprises to do. Personally, I don't think it's inherently a bad thing. That's just the nature of the beast. But are you seeing that at all, Pankaj?
Yeah, I actually see two bookends, and 100%, Mike, absolutely. You have a team where the leader says, I want AI as soon as possible, and I think it's great. But then only the watch out is, do we have the right data? Because at the end of the day, it's training your data, right? Do you have the right data? Do you have the right data governance? Is your lean data lineage right? Are you set up to do that? And then you start, you basically, so for example, you spoke about consumer lifetime value. Are we really set up to have the right data to create that lifetime value or not? So that's one bookend where leadership says, guys, go fast, I want something. So the watch out there is, can we make sure that we are set up to do AI, because garbage in is garbage out. So that's one bookend. The other bookend is where a number of leaders are a little hesitant, and because this either they worry, or it's a culture, or they feel they get redundant, or they don't understand the space. There are many reasons, right? There, what you could do is you have to show proof of concept. You'll say, hey, I want $500,000 to do this. I said, come on, we can do so many other things with $500,000. Say, okay, I basically need $10,000 to do this small, tiny thing and showcase it. The guidance I'll give you in that space is, make sure that you are set up to win, because make sure that your business question is relevant. It is something that is meaningful. It's relevant, it's meaningful. This is also AI, by the way. And you're trying to solve a question. When you answer it, it'll really make a difference. So there are two bookends, and within an organization, you can again have two bookends. You can have a marketing team who says, hey, I can give you, creative in 3 days. But you can have a sales team who says, I can't do a shelf reset in 6 months. So what's the point, right? If I'm going to focus on Belvita, and my sales team needs 6 months to get my shelf right, and my page on Amazon will take 15 days, it doesn't work. So it has to be, and I say it has to be an orchestra which is not very well tuned sometimes. It's a change management challenge. So one thought here. 5 years ago, AI was a technology challenge. I remember, we used to struggle. I've spent a lot of time doing this whole sentiment analysis and, driving Python. And we were learning how to develop a lot of things internally. We used to build a lot of stuff internally. Now we can buy a lot and then we can build internally. Now the challenge is not technology. There's enough technology out there. Now the challenge is, how do you really drive change management in an organization and really drive change with all the fans? We have more technology than we need right now. How do we really drive this change within the organization? So I think that's where the landscape has changed in the last 5 years. And different companies, and even within the company, you have different point of views.
Hey, put your hands together for New Trails and A.